in because we're going to chop it up about something mandatory in the story, and that's moving in silence. Because what y'all don't understand is a lot of times silence is misunderstood. Most people think silence means weakness, like you've ran out of things to say. But a real man knows silence is actually strategy, because the loudest room always exposes the weakest mindset. See, when you move in silence, you control energy. You stop feeding noise to people who haven't earned access to your process. They can't read you. They can't predict your next move. And that confuses them, which is your advantage. The psychology behind silence is simple. When you stop explaining yourself, you start conserving power. Every word you don't speak becomes energy that fuels you from within. When I started learning to be quiet, you know what I noticed? How loud the world was, how everybody's always talking, nobody's listening, everybody's chasing validation, and nobody is interested in mastering patience. Silence changed that for me. It slowed the noise down long enough for me to hear my own thoughts. It gave me clarity, direction, focus, because silence forces you to sit with yourself, not the version that the world expects, but the version of you that you actually are. That's where real power comes from. Not control over others, but discipline and control over yourself. People fear silence because they can't sit still with their own truth. They need distractions, arguments, gossips, constant noise to drown out their reality. But a man who's learned to be silent, he's learned to be still in the storm, and he's learned that peace is louder than chaos. And here's the cold part. Silence is what makes you unpredictable, because once people can't figure you out, they can't manipulate you anymore. They can't play the same old games because you've flipped over the chessboard and walked away from the table. Silence teaches you how to study energy. You start noticing things people miss, how their tone change, body language, word choices. People tell on themselves without even realizing it. You don't have to react, you just observe. And that's how you win, not through confrontation, but comprehension. You start to realize that you don't need to respond to everything that disturbs your peace. Some things deserve your silence more than they deserve your energy. A man who moves in silence, he doesn't need to announce his plans. He reveals it through results, because talk creates expectations. Silence builds anticipation. And anticipation makes people watch. They study you. They speculate. They make assumptions trying to guess what's your next move and what are you busy doing? What are you up to? That's why I stopped explaining myself. If you misunderstood me, that's your problem, not mine. When you move in silence, you stop rushing. You stop being on other people's times and move on your own time at your own pace, because when you're quiet, you can hear God's timing clearer. People that move off impulse, they react to what they see instead of listening to what they know. But silence aligns you with intuition. It teaches you patience, the art of waiting with purpose and in purpose. That's where precision lives. And precision wins every single time over speed. Here's something even deeper. Silence exposes who's really with you. Because when you stop talking, the people who were only listening for opportunity disappear. They were never really cheering you on for the purpose of your growth. They was just standing around waiting to see you fall. But when you got quiet, you learned who checks in and who checks out. You learn who's around for access and who's around for real alignment. And when you realize that difference, your circle changes immediately. It gets smaller, but your peace gets stronger. The psychology of silence is about self possession. It's about not giving people emotional leverage over you. When you stop explaining, defending, or justifying, you keep your dignity intact. Because here's the truth: you don't owe anybody clarity that costs you your peace. Let them think what they want to think. You're not here to convince them of anything. You're here to build. And sometimes God will quiet your life on purpose, not because he's punishing you, but because he's protecting you. He'll silence all distractions so you can hear his voice and direction crystal clear. I remember when I first started moving in silence, people thought I fell off. They thought something was wrong because I wasn't posting on social media, not showing up to events, not talking to anybody. But the truth was, I was becoming who I needed to be in the dark and in my silence, and understood that I'm not the man that they used to know because I'm not the man I used to be. And disappearing from public and just moving low key and staying to myself, that was the best decision I could have ever made. Because I'm not who I used to be. I am who I am now and who I'm becoming. That situation makes you seize yourself different. When you embrace silence, you shift from reactionary to intentional. You stop living off emotions and start living off execution. You stop trying to prove and start improving. And that's when God finally trusts you with the next level that he's taking you to. Because he knows you won't sabotage it by speaking on it too soon. Most people lose their blessings not because they aren't qualified, but because they broadcast their business instead of staying quiet. You know what I mean? You got to be quiet and secure that thing. Let them results speak for you. That's walking in real obedience. Here's the real psychology of it all. Silence rewires your brain for dominance. When you don't speak, your subconscious mind listens. It records the discipline, the restraint, the patience. It learns that you don't move for attention anymore. You move based on alignment. And that's programming. That's making you level up and rise to the top. Because now you falling in love with execution. Most people confuse silence for softness, but silence is controlled aggression. It's knowing when to strike and when to stand down. That's what separates warriors from wanderers. When you move in silence, you gain perspective. You stop forcing outcomes. You start realizing that what's meant for you is meant for you. And it'll find you through your workflow. Silence teaches surrender, not weakness, but wisdom. Because real power is knowing you could speak, but you're making the choice not to. That's what discipline sounds like. It's quiet, focused, it's strategic, it's calculated. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you let silence work on your behalf? When was the last time you stopped explaining and just executed? Think about that for a minute, and how much energy you wasted proving things who would never understand your vision anyway. And imagine how much more powerful you would have been had you invested all of that into yourself instead of speaking on it. Silence isn't about muting your voice, it's about mastering your volume. You speak less and work more. You move harder. That's how your impact lands heavier. That's the psychology of a man in alignment with purpose. He doesn't chase noise. He creates impact. So if you're in that quiet season right now, don't panic. You're not being ignored. You're being prepared because God hides his strongest soldiers in silence before he reveals them in their purpose, walking in their power. If you're in that season of silence, do me a solid and leave me a comment. Let me know where you're tuning in from and if you building something in the dark and what topic you would like us to discuss next. God never not he always keeps his word. So if he's made you a promise, it's already done. Stop questioning your silence and know that it's your strength. Stay focused, stay grounded, stay silent, stay solid. And with that being said, y'all, I'm going to see you in the next episode. As always, all gas, no brakes, lock in, peace.